Meeting up with Bob and Wendy Room at Heathrow, we were all off to the ISDE in northern Brazil. But the first stop was at Iguazu Airport, Sao Paulo. The Airbus 320 was flown by Captain Quick, but it still took 11 hours and we landed on a damp, humid morning. Lots of other European riders were there waiting for the flight north to Fortaleza, and we were happy to be upgraded to business class and enjoy a lovely smooth flight. We stayed at the Hotel Calamari at the Palm Beach, a new resort to the north of the city. It was a very basic hotel, and we were horrified to find the heater for the water was actually on the shower. But we were right by a wonderful tropical beach, and soon we were all out playing in the sea to keep cool. The rest of the British teams were in a hotel close by, and the riders and crews were busy unloading the container and preparing the bikes. Meanwhile, we set off to explore this beautiful area of Ceará in a hire car. It's a tropical paradise almost on the equator. Bob was in charge of a service crew, and we needed to find all the locations for the checkpoints. Along with Dane from Oklahoma City, Okie of course, we were part of the team, along with a large van and a driver provided by the organisation. The local fishermen use distinctive boats with just one sail. They're very colourful, and we watch them being launched with the aid of many wooden rollers. The beaches here are pure white sand, and at Pihana we met these local ladies in their national dress. The location of the special test up here was like a place from a tourist brochure picture. It was awesome. We watched the local lads diving into the lagoon, and then we went off to visit an old aqueduct. Service on day 3 would be in front of the church in the main square of the village of Baribe. The little museum in the village had a lovely shady garden, and we were glad of the cool interior. It was market day, and the place was very busy, especially the fresh fish and meat markets. All kinds of fresh produce was on sale, and the people seemed all to be very happy, well fed, and were very welcoming. The bike shop was also busy, and there were ladies sitting making lace, for which this region of Brazil is famous. When all the shopping was finished, the women all climbed onto this bus to go home. We stopped for lunch at a roadside cafe in Pindoretama, where we watched a man sweep the dirt road. We stopped to look at this place here that was selling everything we could think of made of iron, and Bob was wondering how he could get these things back on the plane. He even saw an old motorbike and thought maybe that would be worth buying, but he wasn't going to get it on the plane. Up in the mountains, the scenery was a bit different, and the houses were low and tiled roofs. And we searched out the place where the time check was supposed to be, but there didn't seem to be enough room. We got out and we wondered how everybody was going to find room to park, and so it proved on the day of the event. It was very, very crowded. Then on the way up the hills we saw this statue to a monk, although we don't know what it was all about. And up here they grow loads of bananas, and we had to be careful. The trucks coming towards us were overladen with bananas. It was Halloween, and the hotel laid on a barbecue and entertainment by a local band. It was all very noisy and we didn't know any of the songs, but all the young riders enjoyed the spectacle of the local girls dancing. And some of the older men enjoyed it as well. Sugarcane is one of the main crops of this area, and at a factory beside the highway we saw how they strip the cane and distill alcohol for fuel and booze. Most of the cars here are fueled by biodiesel or petrol. The drivers here all think they are Ayrton Senna, and after a shower of rain, the roads were littered with crashed cars. Mind you, Bob and Jim had a lot of trouble keeping their eyes on the road, as the women here are scantily dressed and quite well endowed. All sorts of vehicles arrived at the start, and even a very smart bus converted into a nice motorhome that had come all the way north from Rio. The ISDE headquarters were in the beach offices, and most teams had a photo shoot in front of the swaying palms and blue sea. Dario Agrati was here enjoying the scene and taking lots of good pics. But the Parc Fermé was still empty on Saturday, as the unleaded fuel hadn't arrived. They only have leaded fuel in this area. Franco Acerbis was a very worried man, as the event was due to start on Monday and no one had tried out the bikes yet. So the jury had a meeting and had to cancel the opening ceremony to be held in the city of Fortaleza. At last the tankers arrived, having driven all the way from Rio, some 6,000 miles south. Members of the teams had to be organised into an orderly queue and await their turn. Dave May Miller was very hot and bothered by the time he'd filled all the GB cans. Meanwhile, Jim and I signed on as press and were instructed we had to wear a yellow bib at all times. At last the event was underway, and the outriders waited while the riders collected their machines. All eyes were on multi-world motocross champion Stefan Everts, riding a Yamaha in his first ever ISDE. He seemed quite relaxed, and as most of the tests were on sand, he should go very well. All the talk around the Parc Fermé was whether he'd be able to change 2 tyres in the required 15-minute work time. But it was no problem for him. He'd been practicing hard and had a mechanic on hand to talk him through the procedure. Of course, motocrossers don't have to do any work on their bikes. Even in the work area in the morning, it was still hot. But out on the tests, it was even hotter. There was a big contingent from the United States, and everything around their pit was over the top, as usual. Here's all Bob's crew, complete with large van driver, all sitting waiting. No riders here yet. But at one checkpoint by the brewery, a group of local dancers arrived to entertain us, and they danced round in a circle while singing. Bob put Oki in charge of water, a very important job, as in the heat it was important to have enough water for drinking, as well as cooking, washing, and of course cooling the riders. Every day, as soon as we'd set up at the service point, Wendy and I would start cooking the bacon butties and serving tea. It became a popular stop for the outriders. Film crews were kept busy. Joe Bonello and Mark were interviewing Stefan Merriman and Italian superstar Mario Rinaldi. At all the service points, the local children would come to visit and laugh when we were scared of this great big insect that landed on our water can. Sadly, the event was to be marred by the death of a rider. Matt Bowden from GB suffered from heat stroke out on the course after falling off his bike and dislocating his shoulder. The temperature had risen to 54 degrees. Next day, as a mark of respect, all riders wore black armbands. The last day arrived and everyone was asked to sign a Brazilian flag before heading out to the Autodromo Eusébio for the final test on tarmac. The Union flags were flying and final service of the week was set up in a field nearby. Not too many spectators here, as they all had to bring a food parcel that would be given to the poor. It was the final part of the battle between multi-world enduro champion Juha Salminen from Finland and Stefan Everts from Belgium, and their race was going to be the highlight of the day. Racing was exciting and Everts won his heat and the event overall. But Juha was part of the winning trophy team from Finland, while the French young riders won the junior trophy. I had my usual chat and kiss from Gio Sala, who won his class. Now all that was left was for the purple helmets from the Isle of Man to do their stuff. Geraint was roped in to hold the schedule, which of course they totally ignored. And to the utter amazement of the Brazilians, who'd never seen anything like it, they did a great performance, which was almost impossible to film because of the crowd. The ISD in South America for the very first time had been a great success, and at the prize giving, each country tried to have the tallest flagpole. After a few days out in the old port of Fortaleza, where we enjoyed a lovely seafood lunch in a posh restaurant, it was time to fly down to Rio de Janeiro. Our hotel in Rio was right on the seafront at Copacabana Beach. It was magic, and Jim was soon down on the sand looking for the female volleyball players. Up on the tram to the Corcovado, where the view of the city was awe-inspiring. What a location for a city! We could see planes landing at the domestic airport far below us, and in the distance the QE2 was also berthed at the docks. But of course we'd come up here to see the huge statue of Christ the Redeemer, the symbol of Rio, and it did not disappoint. Back down at sea level, we had time to explore Ipanema Beach at sunset and spend some time in the local shops. Driving in this busy city was out of the question, so it was a taxi that took us to the Botanical Gardens early the next day, where we found these statues of naked ladies dancing around on the grass. It was a lot cooler at this time of day, and we found some very big bamboo, and enjoyed the orchid house and the huge range of exotic flowers growing in the gardens, and laughed at the monkeys running over the roof of the mortar house. Next day we took a city tour and it was pouring with rain. We visited the concrete cathedral, which had a leaking roof and an unusual bell tower, and after a drive along the Sambadrome we came to the football stadium, where they stopped outside each gate, which is named after a famous footballer. We took the cable car up the Sugarloaf, but the low cloud obscured most of the view, and it was also a little bit too windy to stay out. It was time now to return to the airport for a short flight to Foz do Iguazu, where we stayed at the Tropicana Hotel, set amongst luxurious gardens. The bright red blossom of the flamboya trees was in full bloom, and the hotel staff kept the bird feeders well stocked with seed to attract the many exotic birds. The awesome Iguazu Falls were right outside the hotel, and the view of these majestic falls was absolutely fantastic and very noisy. As we looked out over the view, we realised some local raccoons had arrived, and we watched them as they skillfully got food out of the litter bins, and one even tried to get at our lunch in my haversack. We took a day trip out to the hydroelectric plant at Itaipu. It was the world's biggest then, just before the one on the Yangtze came on stream. A well-organised fleet of buses take the hundreds of visitors around the dam, and we marvelled at the size of the 13 penstocks. This plant is right on the border of Brazil, Argentina and Paraguay, and has been declared an international peace place, as the Iguazu River is the border of the three countries. We had hoped to be able to cross the bridge into Paraguay, but the border was sort of closed. Our driver explained that the Brazilians go there to shop because it's tax-free, but the queues were far too long, so we just parked near the river to take a photo. We had to stop at the border into Argentina to show our passports and get a stamp on them. As tourists, we were allowed a special concession and a day pass to visit the Argentina side of the falls. We entered the National Park of Iguazu and took a ride on a little train which wound through the forest to the station that was close to the river. We passed Land Rovers and adventure trucks. Leaving the station, we set out on a long walk out across the river on a special metal walkway. We passed an older wooden one at the top of the falls. As we got nearer to the falls, the noise became deafening, and at the mighty Devil's Throat, we couldn't believe the amount of water that was rushing over. Lots of birds nest behind the water, and we watched as they flew in and out. We both got very wet from the spray. And then we had to return back along the long walk back to the railway station. It had taken us almost 2 hours to walk there and back, all the time walking across water. Waiting for the train to take us back out of the park, we admired the unusual hanging birds' nests. That evening we had a lovely meal in the hotel gardens and were entertained by a local trio, complete with a big Welsh harp. All too soon it was our last day, but first we had time to go for a white water ride on the river below the falls. It was a great experience as the rubber inflatable took us right up close to the pounding water, and we got very wet indeed. It was almost impossible to comprehend just how much water flows over these falls. Back at the hotel, we packed our soaking wet clothes in polythene bags, put them in our cases, and set off for the airport for an afternoon flight back to Sao Paulo. We would have a long wait here for our flight back to the UK. I downloaded photographs, chatted with Giovanni Sala, who was also returning home. We'd had a fabulous time in this great country and we couldn't wait to return. But it would be 2006 before we were back in South America.